Anasuya Strasner joins the podcast today. A very special guest. She's a people leader, customer focused executive who's on a mission to make an impact every day. Over the years, I've known Anasuya, and one of the things that always grabbed my attention about her was her extremely positive outlook and approach to life. I've asked Anasuya to join me today to talk about her journey, to talk about her leadership approach, but also some of the lessons that she's learned along the way. So, for those of you that are listening, can walk away with. Anasuya, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
Absolutely. I'm so glad to be here. It's great to talk to you and great to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm doing this leadership podcast and talking to some really impactful leaders that I know that are close in my network. And of course, I always have very fond memories of your style, your people leadership, and the impact that you've always made to the people around you. But I want to start off a little bit with the early days. Maybe you can share a little bit about your career path, your background, and how you eventually transitioned into the impactful leader that you are today.
Sure. I would say, to make a really long story short, I think that one of the reasons why I like to think of myself as an impactful leader is I think I've had a lot of different experiences in life. And it's taught me that, you really, the old saying of you can't judge a book by its cover is really important. Everybody's got something going on. And so, my early days, actually, my first time going to public school was in sixth grade. And before that, I lived basically on the equivalent of like a commune, multiple different ones, uh, where I had the opportunity to, on the positive, I went to school Monday through Saturday. So when I did start public school in sixth grade, I was a little bit ahead because I'd had more education probably and investment in that than maybe others up until then. But at the same time, I grew up actually believing that I was, culturally and from a heritage perspective from India. I didn't actually know that I was not an Indian person by heritage until I was in sixth grade. We just very diverse upbringing, very diverse set of people I spent my time with. So that when I started in sixth grade, I was quite surprised to see how how much people separate themselves based on whether it's their culture or their background or their belief system or the TV show that they like to watch. I really think that that helped me kind of start off, even though it was really hard to start off in sixth grade, sort of like having a major reality check and trying to understand, what the regular TV shows and programs and radios and all the things that people talk about or kids talk about then. I had a lot of catching up to do. At the same time, I started off really understanding that people are very, very different. And even though if they look the same or if they look different, they also have a lot of similarities. And it really informs, I think, the way that I look at the world even today. So that's kind of a little bit about my upbringing. And it really helped me understand that there's a lot of ways to approach things and they don't always look the same.
I'd love to double click on that a little bit with you, right? Just because you talked about a key component there around how the intentionality of human beings just separating ourselves from each other because of our
Yep.
differences and because of our unique and diverse backgrounds, right? But working with you and being able to collaborate with you, I've seen you enable a little bit of a superpower that you have just in terms of bringing people together, just in terms
Mhm.
of having people collaborate of all different backgrounds, different styles, different strengths, etc. Like, can you talk to me a little bit about that? Like, how do you enable, like, obviously based on that experience that you've just described, but how do you enable bringing people together that have different backgrounds and separate themselves intentionally from each other?
I think, I have a genuine interest in people. First of all, I mean, I think everybody has got something fascinating about them inside. We just don't necessarily always know what that thing is. And so it's, an innate curiosity that I have. I'm truly curious about what motivates people and what is going on with them. So whether it's a business situation, whether it's a friendship, whether it's something, from a family perspective, my approach always with every person is to understand what they care about and then understand how what they care about connects to what I care about and make that connection obvious to the two of us or to the group of us. So to me, that's like the magic to everything. If you spend a few seconds just trying to understand what the other person or the group of people that you're talking to really care about, and then you connect it to what you care about and you make that obvious, it becomes then you're having a connected experience that is personal instead of something that is maybe, outside of ourselves, for lack of a better description. And I think that's lacking in a lot of our interactions as people, is that connectedness with each other. And I always look for that no matter what the circumstance is. And I think that's what really helps create that connection with other people.
That's a really great way of describing that, right? Just bringing that little bit of I guess, a loop, a feedback loop, just in terms of
Mhm.
understanding the qualities, the importance of specific components to the individual itself, and bringing that and making it connected together to bring a team together. In addition to that, like, what's your definition of leadership?
My definition of leadership is someone that's is always willing to jump in and lead from the front, if you will. And I was talking to what we now call our early career hire as an example. I was talking to someone right out of college, and we were talking about different skills and what she should develop. It was a woman at this time that I was talking to, and what I said is, as a leader, I never ever feel that you should forget how to do whatever it is you're asking someone else to do. When you're at a point where you're asking a team or a person to do something and you don't actually know how to physically do it yourself, doesn't mean you have to do it, but you should know how to. You've sort of lost your touch with reality. So to me, a good leader is someone who motivates others, who helps others understand the why around what they're doing, and is willing to jump in and show how it's done. And then also at the same time understands when to remove themselves and let other people go and execute it. So it's not being like a micromanager at the same time. So how do you jump in, show people how it's done, empower other people to go do that thing, but never forget how to do it yourself if you need to.
That balance is like so critical, right? Just in terms of defining, things you can do and things you shouldn't do. When you lead people, that you can actually do the job, or you can do part of what you're asking them to do, right? Like, how do you find that balance? Because I know I talk to so many leaders, right? And one of the biggest challenges that leaders have is that they have the ability to do the things that they're asking their teams to do, but it's difficult to find that balance just in terms of actually doing the job for them versus supporting them and enabling them.
Yeah, it's really tricky, because also lots of us are control freaks and want to see how things get done. I know I'm one myself, and I think the first thing is to try to create, at least from my perspective, just because I don't want to do anything if I'm not actually interested in it or excited about it. So I think the why, not to quote Simon Sinek, but like the reason why, why are we doing it? I think everything has to be about the why. What is the impact of what we're doing? And creating that excitement or that interest at a minimum of like, when we get X done, this is what will occur and this is why it matters, and explaining the why. So I always try to make sure that we're connected with the why of what we're doing or the impact. And then I try to ask questions to enable that person or team to explore the answer themselves. So let's say, for example, we're doing a project or we're having, some sort of presentation to a customer. So it's like, okay, why does this presentation matter? Why does this deliverable or asset matter? Let's discuss and get ourselves all equivalently engaged in that outcome.
Mm.
And then I'd say number two, okay, if we know we want this outcome, let's brainstorm together. Like, we want the outcome to be that we win this meeting, or we want this customer to be able to have like clean water. Maybe it's a water treatment. I'm just making it up, water treatment program. Okay, we understand why it matters. We know that the end goal is X. So it's like a joint collaboration discussion instead of me saying, I want it to be this. Wow, if we collectively can understand what we're trying to accomplish, now what are some ways that we could get this done? Like, okay, well, one of us could go do X, another person could go do Y. To create, like, enroll. Someone said something to me one time, is you're always enrolling other people or they're enrolling you. And so my goal is to always be enrolling the team in that outcome. And so the way that I do that is brainstorm what are the possible paths to the outcome. And then we decide on a path to the outcome together and who's doing what. And now that's like nirvana, but there's also times where I think decisiveness is really important. And I think probably all of us have been in situations where it's like the leader won't figure it out. They won't decide. And I do think that's equally important, is to be decisive and to say, okay, thank you for the feedback. I've heard everybody's opinion and feedback about the paths we could get there. I've decided that we're going to take this path, and here's why, back to the why. And if it doesn't work, then we'll revisit it and we'll explore something else. So I think a good leader is someone who enrolls everybody in the possibility, um, identifies possible paths, but then ultimately does select one and identify who's doing what. And I do think that's absent sometimes, is it's too much group thinking and you don't ultimately get to a path and a decision. You have to be okay with being wrong too sometimes.
So well put, right? I love the fact that you solicit the input just in terms of an element of coaching and bringing the ideas out from everybody, but then also creating that the why and defining the outcome and the end goal, and then bringing in that decisiveness to actually execute and form that overall circle of success. I want to tap into your career a little bit, if that's okay with you. Like you've had
Yeah.
some really impactful roles along your way, right? Executive responsible for multiple different customers and teams across the board. You obviously have worked with some of the largest technology companies in the world. Um, when you look back at some of those roles that you've gotten into, some of those senior roles that you've gotten into, did you feel like you've had to set yourself apart for you to be recognized and establish a platform for those roles? Or did you have a good mentor, a good leader that shoulder tapped you and brought you into some of those roles? Can you share a little bit with me about that?
I think it's a combination. And I was talking to someone else about the other day. It's like it's a combination of luck, but then also taking advantage of the luck that you have and owning it and being deserving of that luck. Um, so I would say it's all from little things. You know, I started in consulting at Anderson Consulting, and it was, you know, the time when you had to have like your matching two-piece suit. You couldn't do separates. So I guess that dates me some, but you know, it was things like attitude, little things to set yourself apart. I mean, I always laugh at it. I almost think of it as like a hazing thing, where it was like a consulting, you really were working a lot. I mean, there's a lot of hours, there's a lot of times where, you know, I had plans for the weekend or they had plans at night. I remember I had a boyfriend at the time, and he lived like an hour and a half away from me. And the amount of times I said, you know what, I'm sorry, I can't do anything tonight. You got to turn around and go home. I'm going to be working. Or when I was sending a presentation on dial-up, I would have to I would start the presentation being sent on the dial-up line and like fall asleep and set my alarm to check in like an hour and see if it was like making progress and being sent through. So sometimes it's sheer willingness to work and actually work hard. And I don't think we talk about that enough, is like
Mm.
putting the time in to actually work hard is really important. I think attitude is also very important. I mean, the way I think about it, to the hazing comment is like, yes, sir, may I have another? There's something to be said for having a positive attitude. And when someone asks you to do something, when you're a staff consultant or they're more senior than you, is to not say that's not my job or that's not my boundary. Yes, sir, like let me do it. Let me try it and at least attempt to do it. And people want to work with people who want to say yes. So I think that those are some little things. And then other little things like, you know, I just want to call it out directly. You know, I'm a woman working in technology, and, you know, even as a younger staff consultant, I wasn't the person that was like out at night partying and, you know, doing those late dinners and things like that. And I remember, especially a lot of times from a work perspective, I'd be like the youngest person in the room, or especially in technology, I'd be the only woman in the room. And, you know, everyone after dinner or in those meetings was like going out to dinner or going out to bars afterwards. And I would always say no. And I sometimes felt antisocial doing that, but I felt like it was just better to just after the dinner to go home. So little things like that really, I do think make a difference. And then I think the way that I set myself apart was I really worked hard to know something specific, back to the connectedness topic, about my customer or about the industry. So it's really important. It's such a basic thing, but before you go meet with a customer or before you have a big meeting, go look and see what's happening in that industry or in that market and have some comment that you can make about it. You know, like if you're going to go meet with some sort of, I'll use a customer of ours as a major, you know, mutual fund customer in Canada. And there was a lot of stuff going on with like GameStop and Reddit and what is happening with that whole conversation, if you will. being up to date on what is happening in the world and what is happening with your customer, and being, aware of that from an industry perspective is important. So regardless of your level, you go to a meeting and you can make a comment like, hey, I saw XYZ happening. Or so I always have, and I still do that to this day, is I always try to be up to date on what is happening with my customer or the industry or the conversation that I know I'm going to be a part of. And it's just taking a little bit of extra minutes and time to understand who you're talking to and what that customer cares about. So those are just some little ways I would say, in terms of setting myself apart. And then the only other comment I would make, just thinking out loud, is I had a boss who, but who always said to me, I remember one time I was like so anxious. It was one of my first jobs with him. And I would send him these weekly updates every single week. And I'd be like, here's the 15, 20 different things I've done. And I've 17 different questions that are open that I need to address with you. And I just wanted to be like totally on top of it. And I remember he said to me one time, Anasuya, take a breath and just be yourself. That's why I hired you. And so remember to be like your authentic self, and not to change for a particular business or culture or companies. Really try to be aware of who you are and continue to build your own brand. There's lots of business articles that talk about like brand you, but it can't be like underlined, bold, highlighted enough. Is really get in touch with like who you are and be your best version of yourself. Cheesy as that sounds, it's really important.
There's a lot of great content in there, and yeah, kudos to the great leadership that you've had along the way, right? But I ultimately put that down to everything that you've described there towards a little bit of luck, hard work, well-deserved results from hard work, but also being able to have the right attitude. And then I'd love to come back on a couple of those things, right? But specifically on attitude, let me just double click on that for a second, because one of the things I've noticed about you is that you always have this positive outlook on everything. Like you get things done, like getting things done that comes from what you've described there from a work ethic perspective, but you always have this positive outlook on everything that you do. But having that positive outlook is one thing, being consistent with it is another thing. And I see that with you, like my engagement with you, and I'm sure that everybody that knows you that would listen to this or watch this would agree that you have this consistent positive approach. And so when you say things like, you've been the youngest person in the room, and you've had to make sacrifices and take disciplines and have the preparedness of learning the information, the industry before walking into the meeting, there's a lot of failures and there's a lot of negative impacts that can come from that. And sometimes it's hard to keep your head up and it's hard to stay consistently positive. Tell me a little bit about how do you maintain that and how you're so consistent with your positive impact and outlook to everything.
So I'll make two comments. I'll say I feed the optimism, if you will, for myself on a regular basis. So I keep around me constant things that uplift me so that I can be in that space. So, I have a stack of books next to my bed at night that are everything from philosophy to motivational quotes to things that make me laugh to things that somehow, if I read it, which I probably won't even end up reading the entire book, will make me somehow a better person. But sometimes it just makes me happy by looking at the title. So I keep a stack of books. I mean, let's be honest, right?
Right.
I mean, I keep a stack of books, and I know you have so many books that you have also, but I keep a stack of books that are near me that are positive. And I do 100% of the time, even if it's 2 minutes in the morning, listen to, read, look at something uplifting and positive to start my day. It's really important. I do that every day. That helps me a lot. I always keep something, I'm going to make 3 comments. I always keep something fun around me. I'm really into stickers. I like unicorns and rainbows. I like fun colored pens. I like different colored paper. So I do keep things around me that make me happy and make me smile. Like here's an example right next to me right now. This is my unicorn bag that has all my cords. So I do have things that I keep around me that make me laugh. And then in terms of the failure, the difficult times, there are plenty of times where it's tough. And I'll use the example as being like a mom traveling. And I remember it's easier now because my son is going to be 12 in August, and I can have a conversation with him about working or being gone or what is happening. But I remember like right when he was a baby and I had to go back to work, and there were all these sad books that were like, mommy has to go to work and it's so sad that mommy has to work. And I swore to myself I would never do that. Like I wouldn't make him feel like I'm sad to go to work or I'm sad to leave him, like it's somehow a bad thing, that I was going to create it as like a positive. And it does not mean that every time I leave my son, I remember a parent said to me, and they're not my friend anymore, and I didn't tell them they were not my friend at that time, but they said, oh, it must get easier and easier when you leave your son because you leave all the time for work. And I secretly hated them because I was like, no, that's not true. But creating this experience of helping your children understand that it's possible to be a great parent and a great worker is an important ethic, I think, that kids can learn. And it's all about the parent and setting that. So like, when my son was a baby, I never said to him, oh, I'm so sorry, mommy has to leave. Mommy's so sad, mommy has to leave. You're creating an expectation and a story or a narrative that your child then internalizes. My parent leaving me to go to work is a bad thing, instead of helping him understand what I'm doing all day, sending pictures and videos. I created a whiteboard calendar with like different little visual pictures of where I was going to be or how many sleeps or what was happening. And I mention that because it's very hard, and there's plenty of days where I would be really sad that I left him, but I made myself also have a conversation with him about what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. And I do have conversations with my son even today where I'm like, hey, do you know why you get to have the opportunity to go to the school that you go to, or that we get to make lots of choices, like really fun summer camps? I'm like, it's a little bit like this is my 7 miles walking in the snow story as a parent. But I want you to know that the reason why you get to do all these things is because you also have a mom who works full time and is doing all of these things. And that's an awesome, positive experience, not a sad one. So it's not a failure, but I think it's more of a mental state of looking at the positive and looking at the value, maybe not even the positive or the optimistic side. I think I try to look at the value of something and see that and articulate it for my child as well as for myself. And I think that helps me be positive, if that makes sense.
I love that. I love the positive intentionality that you have just in terms of those examples that you've just described, and making that a part of your environment intentionally
Yeah.
is super
Yep.
critical. And then also creating a bit of fun as well, ensuring that you have things around you that are fun and that is aligned to who you are as an individual. But I also just the way you've described the overall ethic of being able to articulate the fun or the goodness of comes from being a good worker, but also a good parent at the same time, is so vital. And I'd love to ask you, like where do you think most people fall short with that, right? Because it's so common where you either are more on one side, i.e., work, or you're more on the other side of being a parent, and one side's never one of the two sides never really gets the amount of focus that you'd ultimately want to put in it. And so I'd love to pick your brain on where do you think most people fall short with that?
Well, I would say we all, if we're honest with ourselves, feel like failures in certain categories of our lives. I do not believe in the work-life balance topic. I believe in integration, and I believe in being thoughtful about where you're going to fail and where you're going to succeed and switching it up. So there are definitely days that end where I'm like, gosh, I wish I had done like a drawing lesson with my son. Lately, we like to
Right.
draw together. I didn't get enough drawing in, or we didn't read enough story time, or I didn't get him to bed, early enough, or I was doing X, Y, and Z while he, was getting ready for dinner, and I should have been more connected. All these conversations that I think we all have with ourselves. And I think the important thing is to be, like you said, is introspective about it and aware of it, and then making a different choice the next day. Like, okay, great, I failed here today. I perceive I failed here today. Tomorrow, what am I going to do different so that I can make that feeling of failure go away? And then I'll switch it to a work perspective. There's definitely days where something happens. I have to go pick up my son early from school, or he's got a football practice, and I'm like, I didn't earn it. from a work perspective at the level that I feel that I need to today. So what am I going to do differently tomorrow? And I think that's really the important thing is, okay, so then what I'll do is if I have a day where I think, there was 15 people I should have called back today, I didn't because I got focused on other things, then the next day, what am I doing? So then what I will do is then if like it was a work failure day and more parenting success day, then the next day I'm going to say to myself, okay, what does that mean for me? Okay, then tomorrow I cannot do any of these parenting things, or I need to wake up tomorrow morning. I need to wake up at 5 a.m. and I need to sit from 5 to 7:30 and I need to focus on all these work things I didn't feel like I got done, the day before, and I need to catch up. And maybe I don't like get to do all the parenting things I might like to do in the morning. Like maybe I want to make muffins or I want to do whatever, right? That make me feel like I'm an amazing mom. You got to rotate them. And so I think that to me, the way that I handle it, and I think that's what people forget is the rotation, is I think we set an expectation for ourselves that we're going to succeed in all categories at the same time. I personally don't think that's possible. I think we can succeed in some categories and fail in others, and then we can rotate it so that ultimately, hopefully, we end up being more successful than more on the failing side. And so I would say that's kind of the way I try to approach it, is to be introspective about where I perceive I'm succeeding and failing, and rotate the successes and failures so I end up in a generally positive state. And then the only other thing is being really, really diligent about our time spent on our phones and social media.
Right.
I am really try hard, just like everybody else. I do when I'm having dinner with my son. I do not use my phone. I do not believe in texting and having all that stuff going on while you're having dinner or a meal with a friend or a colleague or your children. Being really thoughtful about your usage of the phone, I think is very important. My son and I have a thing. This is his like, hey, I'm feeling like, this is our little sign for each other. Like I'm feeling like there's too much phone usage. And I encourage a conversation with him to say, hey, mama, can you please get off the phone? I'm feeling like you're not paying attention to me. And on the flip side, if I feel like he's on his iPad too much, I say to him, how do you feel when you're talking to me and I'm on my phone? That's how I feel when I'm talking to you and you're on your iPad. Like it's that conversation. And I think, I said a lot of thoughts, but I think from my perspective, it's rotating your successes and failures so you have more successes. It's instead of beating yourself up about where you perceive you have failures, saying, what am I going to do differently next time? And continually facing yourself forward. What am I going to do to be different? How am I going to change my behavior? And being in a conversation with your friends or your family about that balance, so that if someone else perceives that it's not in the right place, they can also be a reminder to you, so that you really get a lot of reminders to center yourself back to the person you want to be.
Before I go to my next question, I just have to say, I love the bond that you and your son have, by the way. It's pretty awesome. It just comes out
I'm
in the conversation.
For it, yeah.
It just comes out so naturally in the conversation, and you tend to reference it quite a bit. Not sure if you noticed that, but it's awesome to see.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
You seem to also be doing in everything that you talk about there, right? Throughout all the questions, the entire conversation that we've had, you seem to be doing a lot of reflection on all the lessons learned throughout your journey, all the things you've been naturally good at, all the focus areas that you've applied to be successful, but then also some of the key advices that you've got from good leaders and good coaches along the way. If you were to look back in the theme of reflection and highlight one component of your leadership journey that you're the most proud of, what would it be?
I'll give a recent one. I mean, there's all different things. It's, it all comes down to different choices we make and our attitudes about them. But I am actually most proud of one that's pretty current. I had a role that was business development and strategy for our North America cloud and license business at Oracle. And, we had a time period where we split our business, and you're aware of this, but we split our business from license and the cloud into two separate businesses. And at the time, my boss at the time said, we're going to split up your whole team. I didn't know ahead of time, even though it was my boss. We're going to split up your whole team. You've got to assign half of the team to license and half of the team to cloud. And by the way, now that's two separate teams. So you got to think about like what you want to do next. And it kind of came as a shock to me, just like it came as a shock to probably everybody who was in the organization. And it really gave me a chance to be introspective about changing what you're doing and evolving. And I did some research. I thought to myself, when you look at an only exclusively cloud company, what are the types of roles that exist when you're a cloud only company? And this concept of customer advocacy and customer success. And I worked at HP, and they used this term for a while that was called empty calorie revenue, which was basically you could buy something, but if the customer's not using it, it's kind of pointless. It's like eating a bag of potato chips. There's no protein in it. And so I said to my boss at the time, I want this role of customer advocacy and customer success. I want to be focused on what happens once our customers buy something. How are they doing? How are they successful? How are they using it? Like, I actually feel passionate about that. I actually care, and I want them to be successful. But I didn't know what that job was going to look like. There was no definition for that job or that role. I sort of had to roll my own, and it was sort of scary. And on top of that, I was going through a lot of personal change at that time. And I remember sitting down with my boss, and he's like, "You're not going to get upset with me, are you?" And I take a deep breath and say no and be brave, put on our brave face. And we had a big kickoff meeting, maybe 2 weeks after that. And he's like, "I want you to come and present to the team what your job's going to be, like the whole organization, like all the managers. And I want you to talk about how we're going to recreate our culture and what that means." Do you think I had any clue what I was going to say in 2 weeks? And I was still having to get over it myself and figure out what that even meant or what that change meant. And I'm up for the challenge, if you're not in technology, if you're not somewhat competitive, but to get up there in front of everyone and reinvent myself in public was a hard thing. That was scary. And it was hard. I had to give myself a major pep talk in the morning that day, be like, you know what? Okay, go up there and you've got this. You're going to have a great attitude and you're going to do it. And then it evolved into something incredible that I'm so happy with. I can't tell you how much I love talking to our customers. I really love it. There's some incredible customers, incredible people doing amazingly cool, innovative things. And I would not even be talking to all the customers I get to talk to a day if I hadn't chosen to step into that reinvention moment. And I'm really proud of that. It's easy to say change is a constant and we have to embrace change. It's a whole nother thing to jump into it and reinvent yourself and keep doing it. And to me, I'm really proud that I say that out loud, but that I was able to do it and show myself I could do it. It was encouraging.
That's amazing. And I think a cool thing that came out of that as well is our opportunity to partner and work with an exceptionally great customer in the market doing some really special things as well, which was super cool and was a great experience. I think this is a great place to leave it. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I appreciate you sharing the insight and the journey. You have a tremendous profile and background, super admirable on everything that you've done and everything that you live by. So appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.